Oh, that's right. It's probably Latin based entirely.
Yes, because Saxo is good at his grammar, as his title would indicate, and that grammar being Latin grammar, because he is a
The bottled water industry hates when you do this, but they can't do a damn thing about it. This bottle can slow aging, boost your energy, and
because he is a.
Now,
what was his position with the church? Do we know? With the Roman Catholic Church. Anyways, that's a strange side trail, and we're in the midst here. So let's go ahead and finish out this work, and we'll get into the next section here because we're getting close.
All right. Yeah, we did kind of tangent off.
We tend to do.
As we tend to do. It's like running around in circles. Now, this is interesting too because people will hear it, and it's kind of an interesting point in which the story itself is probably all the way back to the migration period, but there's a mentioning here that brings it right into the modern time. If you were a poet of the 10th to 11th century, that I find super amusing. It amuses me all the time every time I hear it. But it does kind of play some of the politics that were going on at the time, or at least the religious politics.
All right, pause before Spawn gets into it, just because I found it out. The idea is Saxo was the archbishop's clerk, perhaps, and Gesta Danorum does mean the deeds of the Danes, which, deeds that are written down are history. So, yeah. History or deeds of the Danes, I think, probably works, but linguistically. Go ahead.
All right. Well, so in 12, it says, and she's still chanting the spells over Svithda, and she says, "A seventh I chant thee, if frost shall seek to kill thee on lofty crags, the fatal cold shall not grip thy flesh, and whole thy body shall be." So again, all of these spells, all of these poems, when you're reading this, should be in your mind, wow, these are like viable concerns amongst our ancestors. This was something they didn't want charms of uselessness. They wanted ones that made sense. And again, no more is more prudent than in number 13. An eighth I will chant thee, if ever by night thou shalt wander on murky ways, yet never the curse of a Christian woman from the dead shall do thee harm. And this one is just super interesting. So the translation is Kristin Dauðkona, a Christian dead woman. And this cursing from beyond the grave, or while possibly one is dying. I looked into a little bit about this, and there's a couple of things. One, Christians looked very badly upon their fellow folk who still remained to the native European faith. Their religion is kind of bent to do that. And the idea that a curse or something that can affect people was still held before Christianity came. So the idea of it just being a Christian woman lends me to think that this is more of a common occurrence, that these Christian women would have a tendency to sling curses upon those around them. I mean, these women were, in essence, the first kind of, turncoat slash betrayers of their culture.
I came not to bring peace, but a sword.
Oh, that's from the Bible, right?
But the key tenet to that passage, I came not to bring peace, but a sword, to turn, and I don't want to, get it wrong, but to turn kinfolk against one another.
Right. To sever
there are no bonds of kinship,
right.
There's to eliminate bonds of kinship in order to tie the worshiper specifically with the white Christ.
See, and that is a very interesting point, because you see that on social media where they're trying to say, the rabbi Yeshua is not so pacifist because he said this. But if you read further, it's so that
it's not a sword to slay the foe. It's a sword to divide families.
To divide your own families apart.
Cut you apart from your parents and from your line of kinship.
Right. Because they could be good people, but if they don't accept the rabbi and the truth and the light and the way, they don't get in to the
Because man's not saved by deeds, but by faith alone, that none might boast.
Right. So
that's why our random side point here, and this will become more relevant later, and it's certainly relevant when we celebrate the ascendancy of King Athanaric. But recognizing the threat of Christianity to severing and disrupting kinship and clan and cutting people off and making them rootless was something that the wise amongst our ancestors noticed, and those who could break the fetters of the momentum of the time they were in stood against and tried to stem the tide of.
Yeah, and this kinship between folk, I think a lot of people try to utilize it against, say, if they're ideologically against us, they'll try to say, your people enslaved each other. Like, yes, slavery's been practiced all over the world by everyone. So ethnic groups would enslave ethnic groups, especially.
Posted the full passage from Matthew 10. I appreciate that, because everyone who's not familiar with their Bible, and I'm not trying to believe me, this is not the program I'm trying to. Well, you know what? You should be familiar with it, so you know what that's about, because it's very far. It's very far from what I think a lot of Christians are aware of or would try to tell you. And I think this was a very, very clear thing we all should know. The Apostle Matthew, in that book, it says, Jesus says, do not think that I came to bring peace on earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a man's enemies will be those of his own household. And I think that, we can't spread the good word, too much on that. I think the more we let that be known, the more clear and stark the choice between that and between anything else, but very specifically between that and between Ausatrue for our folk, is painted in very clear colors for us all. And I think we would do well to heed that.
Yeah, I think that's a good one to bear in mind, when the intention of we're not so pacifist. We should be, what are they, Templars or Knights, fighting for the Holy Land. And it's like, read the rest of that. it's not good.
It's literally warned against in the Voluspa as well as the beginning of Ragnarok.
Yeah, I saw that where you had Nick. He posted the Voluspa where it says, in that brother shall fight brother, and that the bonds of family will be broken, and kinslaying is of course on the top of the list. But I digress. I just thought it was very funny.
But that's the thing about this little poem isn't. When we restrict our lore to archaic stories of some old Vikings, that's fun and it's interesting. But I don't think enough people take note of the seriousness and the modern day relevance that the wisdom within it contains. And there is quite a bit more than people realize.
Well, and I think our ancestors, when Christianity was coming in, and especially with these women that were, because they made the groundwork before the sword. There was the woman, generally, bonds of marriage. There were, land grabs and usury that the church used quite often, but more often than not, it was about introducing women and moving them into, spots of power from elsewhere, mainland, from England.
How many guys do we know, you and I, Svan, that have come through the Austrue Folk Assembly and have quit and rejected everything they believed in for the attentions of a woman?
I can think of 6 right off the top of my head.
Lots.